Hello, and welcome to the Early American Brass Band Podcast. I'm Chris Triano, joined always by Stephen Canastracey.
Hello.
And this is episode number 8, where we'll be discussing Civil War brass bands with George Mason University trumpet professor Dr. Dennis Edelbrock. Dr. Edelbrock is the professor, as I just mentioned, of applied trumpet at George Mason University. He's retired from the United States Army Band in Washington, D.C., the Army Brass Quintet, the Herald Trumpets. He's also the founder of the National Trumpet Competition and is featured on the Civil War Brass album by Classical Brass, Honor to Our Soldiers, and appeared as a member of the Marine Band in the Steven Spielberg film Lincoln. Whew. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff there. Yeah, a long list, but fantastic person. Stephen and I know Dr. Edelbrock very well from George Mason University, and hearing him talk about his passions, both with the military, with the Army, and with all these various early brass projects that I just mentioned, it's really refreshing to hear his passion.
Yeah, it was great to hear his stories, especially about being involved with the movie Lincoln. That's something that is really neat for a real, live musician to be involved in a major motion picture. That's not always the case, and I was really glad to hear stories that kind of supported how I hoped that project went for the band. So I really enjoyed that part of the conversation.
Yeah, it's really an optimistic and positive, outlook on a lot of things that are happening in the field that is definitely refreshing and enjoyable to hear. Before we jump into the interview with Dr. Edelbrock, I'd like to first give a quick mention to some of our friends out there in the world of podcasts. A great podcast we really want you guys to check out is called Addressing Gettysburg. This podcast releases both shorter segments of information as well as longer narrative episodes that are done really, really well, all about the Battle of Gettysburg, but then also the city of Gettysburg as well. So we want you guys to go check out Addressing Gettysburg. And then another friend of ours that you guys should really check out is called History Tunes. They have a website and a Facebook that we'll link in our show notes. A lot of really great information about Civil War music and earlier. I believe they have music information from the War of 1812 and the Revolutionary War as well. So please check out History Tunes on their website and Facebook, linked in the show notes. And without further ado, here is the interview with Dr. Dennis Edelbrock from George Mason University. All right, we would like to welcome Dr. Dennis Edelbrock to the Early American Brass Band Podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us this afternoon.
My pleasure, guys. It's always welcome. It's always fun to be around people that are as passionate and enthusiastic and as professional as you guys are.
Well, thank you so much. We'll see how the interview goes. You might have to take that back, but hopefully it hangs on.
I think we'll be just fine.
Thank you. Awesome. So I think the usual format, I guess, of our interviews has kind of been going somewhat chronologically. So if you don't mind, can you tell us a little bit about how you got into music, maybe when you started playing the trumpet and where you attended school, those types of early details?
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. As it turns out, both my parents were musicians, are now gone. My dad was my first band director and my trumpet teacher, and my mom was my piano teacher. So we had a little summer music camp and stuff. And I was able to join the union when I was in 7th grade.
Oh, wow.
I started playing in a professional concert band when I was in 9th grade.
Wow. So this was all on trumpet, right? Not cornet that early on?
Trumpet. Correct, trumpet. Yeah. So I have a really long heritage of band playing, band performing, band literature, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Very cool, very cool. And I know that you were a member of the United States Army Band in Washington, D.C. Was there a family connection to the military also, or were you kind of the first one to...
Well, yes and no. My dad was drafted during World War II, and once they found out he had a college degree and could lead was a band officer, could be a band, he went to Fort McNair to get to audition with the Army Band. What they would do, he was a warrant officer, or they made him a warrant officer. You take like an 8-week course. They want to make sure that you can start and conduct the national anthem. And I've got tons of stories I won't go into. Just crazy stuff they ended up doing,
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
That's
stuff he had to do as a band leader. It's not like,
Yeah, so you had grown up being familiar with military music and all that. So was the your audition for the Army band something that you saw coming, or what was that experience like?
Yes, I had just graduated from the University of Iowa with the music ed degree, and I was all set to go to Northwestern and work with Vincent Chikowitz, famous trumpet teacher of
Mm-hmm.
my generation, Chicago Symphony, the whole green deal. And I got a call from a buddy of mine who was a bass trombone player who had just graduated from Iowa and was out in the band and said, hey, you know what? They have an Army brass quintet, which no one really had ever heard of before because they were still basically getting formed.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, you might want to come out and take an audition. So I said, well, we have nothing to lose. I sent in my tape and they flew me out.
Mm-hmm.
So I came out here and I sat in with a quintet and they played quarter note triplets and it kind of stopped my heart. I never played with 5 musicians. It sounded like 1, 3, 4.
Wow.
Not on that level anymore.
Mm-hmm. So was that audition that was specifically for the brass quintet, or that was just a component of the audition for the band?
Right. I'm glad you asked. I went through a 45-minute audition, a solo audition, and before that, once I passed that, and they tortured me with tons of sight read, I sat in with the quintet for a half an hour. So
very cool. So then, while you were with the Army and doing a lot of the quintet stuff, so obviously you were just kind of alluding to doing a lot of ceremonial work as well, right? So I'm sure you spent a fair amount of time in Arlington.
I do. In fact, I have 2 records that will most likely never be broken. The most taps played, over 10,000. And the most miles traveled to play 1 taps. I flew all the way to Kuwait after Gulf War to play taps with the royal family in Kuwait.
Wow. Are those military records or are those Army records?
They're Army records. Yeah, they're unofficial Army records.
Yeah. That's incredible.
There's
That's awesome.
Stuff like that.
Yeah. You have a plaque or anything in Brucker Hall?
No, I should though. Yeah, the most taps played. Oh my gosh, yeah. Right.
Yeah. Now, you also were involved with the Herald Trumpets with Pershing's Own, right? Was that something that was there when you won the position, or did that group start after you had gotten into the band?
No, that group started with the Queen in presence in 1958, I think it was. If you opened St. Lawrence Seaway or something, they put it through a section together, and there was a Lieutenant Colonel Adjutant Gil Mitchell was his name, who was a trumpet player, played in the New Orleans Philharmonic, and then got drafted. I think during maybe Korea came in, and but he just loved the British history and the tradition, all that stuff the British guys do. They do their salutes and it takes them 20 minutes, and all that stuff.
There you go. Yeah.
And what could be more irresistible than a trumpet with a flag on it with your, So he put it together with another guy in the band who was very, very psyched about it. And honestly, that's the reason we have Hail Columbia is the Vice President's March, because Gil Mitchell picked that out. You guys probably don't know that. I have a copy of the letter from then Vice President Nixon.
Oh, wow.
So they played that and said, hey, you guys like that? And he said, yeah, this is a keeper. And then they got to pass a resolution through Congress and the whole deal. So it became the official Vice President's March.
That's really
no one ever knows it. The only time you'd ever hear it is possibly in an inaugural,
That's true. Yeah. I know a lot of our listeners, are going to be familiar with Hail Columbia as being one of the potential anthms in the running for the national anthem.
There is a Civil War tie, you sneaky rascal.
Yeah,
good for you. Good for you guys. Yeah, absolutely. That's where it came from, because it was very popular at one time, of course.
Yeah, definitely. I didn't actually know that it was attached to a vice president as late as Nixon. I actually thought that it was a tradition earlier than that. But yeah, that's really interesting.
Now, it's not Taylor Swift, but back in its day, it was pretty popular, right?
Yeah, might as well have been, right?
Right. Yeah.
Do you have a particular memory that you maybe hold closest to your heart in terms of Herald Trumpet performances?
Well, there's so many. I mean, after you played Olympics and Super Bowls and all this stuff, standing right next to presidents. And one that comes to mind is I wrote a fanfare that they still use. Salute to a New Beginning. Have you guys heard that?
Yeah,
If you get a chance to hear
they came to Mason once and did a concert and they played it.
Correct.
Yeah, a couple years ago.
Anyway, I wrote that when Reagan won the election. His I can't remember his campaign speech. It was something about a great new beginning. So I thought, let's just have some fun. Write something that's got some. Well, they're honestly rock and roll rhythm, bum 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 bum. Kind of jazzy, whatever you want to call them. And everybody's kind of looking at me like, "Are you crazy? We just play this stuff by dead British guys.
Yeah,
we don't play anything." Well, you know what I'm talking about.
Oh yeah,
Elgar
definitely.
and all that. And it's all wonderful. But I'm going, you know what? This guy, he loves show business. He was a big time actor. I guess you guys know that, right?
Definitely.
Big time. Oh my gosh. Yeah, he was a household name, I thought, what do we have to lose? I mean, if the colonel won't play it, he won't play it. I can't order him to. And once the guys finally got it rehearsed, we played it and it went really well. And we got a note from the White House and it ended up with mentioning in Time magazine. And I mentioned in the, what's the Reagan book? The greatest role or something, role like is in cast, play or something. Anyway, it's mentioned in there. And I dedicated to his administration. Well, once he found out about that, and most likely it was, his chief of staff, they invited the Herald over to the White House. And I have a really cool picture of me shaking hands with him.
Oh, wow.
In the Rose Garden.
That's awesome.
Standing at attention the best you can and still shaking.
That's great.
And he, I got to know him a little bit because we were around him quite a bit. And he just, oh my gosh, he just loved hanging out with the guys.
That's awesome.
He wasn't at all above anybody. It didn't matter. The guy cleaning the restroom or polishing the furniture. He was just one of those guys,
Yeah.
Anyway, awesome. So he invites us over, and we're over there, and I'm introduced by the caller. This is Sergeant Edelbrock, blah, blah, blah. And you go, oh, really? Well, let me tell you about the time I was in the band. And he went to a boys' school in, I think, Elgin, Illinois. He grew up in northern Illinois. And he was in 8th grade, and he was the drum major, okay? Which meant he carried the big stick, right, the mace. You guys know about that, right? And was out in front of the band. Well, they were doing a parade one time. He's out front waving his, Mr. Proud, he didn't play an instrument, but I don't know how he got that position. But anyway, the parade marshal was on horseback, comes up and tells the band director something, but Reagan can't hear because he's in front of the band. The band director is marching along next to the front rank. That makes sense? Okay, clip clop of horses and, crowd cheers and all that stuff. He doesn't hear. Well, it keeps going on, and after a couple blocks, the band is getting more faint and more faint. And he looked around. They changed the parade route for some reason. I don't know. And they made a corner, and he didn't get the word. They turned, so he's out front, looking like he owns the place. There's no band behind. In fact, there's no parade behind him. Nothing, but people laughing at him. So he said that was it. He was out of the band at that point.
That's
and he
great.
told, he's so famous for self-deprecating humor. And that's just so characteristic of everything I've ever heard about him or read about it.
So do you think that piece that you wrote for the Heralds is one of the earliest original American compositions for the Herald Trumpets?
Yes. There were a few others that came from other composers in the band. But as you guys know, the Herald Trumpets, I get a little emotional talking about that. There's no other group in the world that plays like that. Okay, all the other service bands, the British, all the guard bands have heralds. I mean, Disney has heralds, but they just, our heralds are really pretty special.
They put on quite a show, and they sound fantastic.
You hear those nice E-flat sizzling out on those guys. Oh my! Well, the word we'd like to use is exhilarating. That one's up close, and you'll never forget it.
Couple years ago, I had a great experience at Eastman. They have an arts leadership program, and you have to do 2 internships to graduate with that certificate. Cool. And I was able to shadow the Army band for about a month and a half during the summer. And I was down there around the time, well, I was there for the 4th of July, and they do that big Capitol 4th concert by the Capitol, and I was able to be with the Heralds for most of the day. And then I wasn't ever on camera, but yeah, I mean, those guys in the rehearsal, it was just like so professional, and they went on, they laid it down, and they went off, and it was perfect. And I was like, yeah, like that's how you do it right there.
There's something about those guys, they don't go through their scientific warm-ups and they just roll your eyes. Where do you want us to play? And you get the marks out. There are always marks for the guys, so it looks perfect on camera. And they just walk out and play and go, really? I mean, I need my warm-up, man. No, and the best part about that job, though, is you get a police escort to the job. You know about that, right? You remember that? Or
yeah.
Were you on the bus?
I don't. I was on the bus with him, yeah.
That's the good stuff, man.
Yeah.
You don't have to be there 8 hours early because of parking or traffic. You go in with, oh, yeah, man. That's the way all artists ought to be treated, right?
Yeah, there you go. Definitely.
Maybe in our next life, right, guys?
Yeah. We can only hope. We know that you were involved with a recording project with the classical brass on an album, Honor to Our Soldiers. I think that recording came out in 1991. But that actual quintet classical brass, is there actually a difference with that group and the Army Brass Quintet, or is that kind of just the public name that you guys were allowed to use to get a CD out?
Like you said, the difference was the costumes. Yeah,
for sure.
One is tux and one is it's the same 5 guys. We just love working together, Chris. And that's one of the things you guys know. Chamber music is the music of musicians, right? Because you make all the decisions. How fast you're going to play it? How loud? Are you going to rubato here? All those decisions. There's no conductor to tell you what to do. Mm-hmm. And so the good news is you got complete freedom. The bad news is, you got to make decisions and everybody has to go along with it.
Yeah, for sure.
You can't have 5 guys being right all the time,
Yeah. Were there any recordings by classical brass prior to the Honor to Our Soldiers album, or is that your first recording project?
That was our first recording project, yeah.
Gotcha.
And we got into that because of a recording engineer I had worked with downtown with the Washington Chamber Symphony. And I put it together with Mark, who was really excited about it. Mm-hmm. Mark, that's Mark Elrod.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. And we got to talking. I said, oh, yeah, you got to do this. I'll give you the horns. I'll give you the music. I'll coach you, whatever you need. Boom. It's a done deal. I thought, you know what? This is supposed to happen. So we did it on a spec deal, right? So Greg, the guy, the recording engineer, shopped it around and finally got a contract from American Heritage Society. And they re-released it recently, Anyway, so he said, hey, he shopped that around to American Heritage Society. Said, yeah, send it to us. We'll look at it. So at that point, we could have done all that work and not ever gotten a penny out of it, which, you don't go into music to make money, not classical music or certainly Civil War music. So we just got psyched and thought, you know what, we got a shot at this,
So the project was recorded and then you worked on getting it released after the work was already done?
Correct. That's a spec deal. In other words, we didn't have the name that Columbia Artists or the American Heritage said, oh yeah, get those guys. We'll pay them, blah, blah, blah. They say, hey, show us the finished product. Let's see if we think it's saleable, which I understand. We were basically unknown quantity,
And as you're saying, mostly came about as a passion project from the recording engineer and Mark Elrod?
Yes. Mark Elrod has that passion, as do we. Yeah. And the recording engineer had really good contacts with American Heritage. So they kind of took his word for things. Or, if he called them, they'll listen. If I called them, they said, oh, yeah, right. Well, they wouldn't even refer the call, most likely.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to diss American Heritage because they're great. But, it's somebody, they get calls like, oh, my gosh, countless calls.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
From starving artists. Sometimes they're fabulous. Sometimes they're, people that play for their own, excitement, as we say.
Mm-hmm. Now, would you say that the goal of the recording project was to get a recording of the title piece, the Honor to Our Soldiers, and then the other pieces were kind of in as filler, or?
Yes and no. The title Honor to Our Soldiers is something I think I suggested, but I could be wrong. The piece that we'll get into the history of that in a minute. It just had a nice ring to it, honoring, the Civil War people, the whole deal. And that was right about the height of the rebirth of the Civil War stuff, after Glory came around and all that stuff.
Yeah, yeah. And the Ken Burns documentary was in 1990, so it was
Right.
coming out right after that. Yeah.
Right. Hey, and that reminds me, that what's the da 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 da? What's the name? What was the theme song that was played through all that?
The Ashokan Farewell.
Right. Do you guys know where that came from?
Yeah, it's not a Civil War tune. It was written in the 80s, right?
Right. Well, I don't know when. I thought it's probably a little earlier, but it's like a farewell tune, kind of alma mater from a music camp up in upstate New York somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know words to it.
Jay Unger, I think, is the guy who wrote it.
That sounds. You guys have done your homework.
It's the most.
What's that?
I was gonna say it's the most famous non-Civil War Civil War song.
Oh, absolutely, and it makes you want to go get some hardtack and water and live it up.
Exactly.
And listen, right?
For sure, definitely.
But yeah. So that piece was on, be on the radio or something. You'd be behind a commercial or something, and kind of everybody knew what it was anyway. So.
Yeah. Can you get into a little bit about the history of that title track and why you thought it was significant to choose that as the title of the album?
Yes, and that's thanks for asking, because that's really kind of a neat story. Mark Elrod, who we owe that recorded to in many, many ways now, is really quite an historian. I don't know how much you guys know about him, but I know, Chris, you've seen his amazing collection, which I think rivals, from what I've heard, and not just from Mark, that it rivals the Smithsonian collection. So he's got, I don't know, maybe 15 E-flat, keyed bugles and the whole it goes on and on.
Yeah.
Anyway, he can tell you, for instance, exactly the band instrumentation that went up to Gettysburg on the train with President Lincoln. He's got the manifest. It's unbelievable. He actually owns a tuba that was owned by the Marine Band.
Wow.
And could have been on that trip. He's got the serial number. He's got the invoice. He's got everything. You just kind of go, wow, this is unbelievable.
Yeah. Wow.
Anyway, so he dug that up and said, "Oh, guys, I just found this, doing some research, and we played through it. It's just a very simple hymn. The music itself is not extraordinary, but the story really is. And it had to do, it was going to be premiered the night that Lincoln was assassinated at Ford's Theater. And it was going to be premiered by an actress whose name was Laura Keene, who was a sort of self-made singer. She wasn't really well known as a singer and didn't do much of it. So she was a little skittish about it to begin with, which we can all understand. She had a big name as an actress, and I Googled her just the other day because I knew we were going to talk. And she apparently was quite an entrepreneur, actress, and what do you call it?
Self-promoter or something?
Well, yeah, but she actually ran and eventually owned at least one theater. So she was owner, producer, actress when necessary. She was a really pretty amazing lady. Anyway, so she was on to star. So that was a big deal to have her. That's what I'm trying to say. She was like a big star in that era. Mm-hmm. So she was hired to play Our American Cousins, and John Wilkes Booth, of course, the idea was she was going to sing "Honor to Your Soul" onto the soldiers during the first act. Well, she got kind of stage fright, and so William, the band leader, William Withers, said, "Hey, no worries, don't freak out. Over the voice tube, voice tube is, right? They could call down to the orchestra pit. It's like you have on old steamships, the colonel, where the captain could vote. It's a tube that goes all the way down to the engine, so he can say full speed ahead or whatever." Anyway, so they called down to him and said, "Oh, Mr. Withers, she's not willing to sing. She's freaked out, whatever." He said, "No worries, we'll just do it as an entr'acte, during the second act or something. Give her a chance to kind of walk off stage, get a drink of water, and calm her down." Anyway, so of course, as you probably know, Lincoln was shot during the second act, so the thing was never premiered. Okay. And they wanted to do it with Lincoln in there because that's, he was there. What a cool thing to honor something like that, honor all these, 700,000, deaths in the Civil War. Oh my gosh, it just goes on. So at that point, you guys probably know the rest of the story. He comes down, he jumps out of the president's box onto the stage, hurts his leg pretty severely, goes through all the tunnels to get out. He knows the theater, because he's an actor himself, right? So at that point, she goes up to the Lincoln box, right? And his head is on her lap while he's dying. Now, I don't know whether they had any kind of personal connection or she just felt response. Who knows what But I mean, it's really a pretty amazing part of history.
Yeah. And then
So anyway,
I think that original, the original composition was not intended for brass band, right? So what, or who, I guess is the better question,
Well,
was responsible for arranging the version that you guys ended up performing on the recording?
now that's a good question. I think Mark. I can't remember if Mark gave us like a piano arrangement you'd play behind a singer. I don't know if he did that, and maybe I did it, or if he had it. I honestly don't know. Yeah, I just don't remember.
So then, where did the other music on the album come from? Where did you guys find all that stuff?
Well, thank you, Mark Elrod.
Yeah.
Most of it came from the 26th North Carolina Regimental Band Book, which you guys probably know.
Yeah, we've mentioned that band in particular on maybe every episode, but if not, pretty close.
Oh, okay. Well,
yeah, they come up a lot.
Oh my gosh! They went into Gettysburg with flags waving. That band was there blaring. Oh my gosh! Can you imagine trying to play in tune and people shooting at you?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I mean, the whole thing is just the more you know about the Civil War, the more you love history, the more you realize what those people were made out of, and God, there's so much at stake, and
Yeah.
I just looked through the liner notes of your CD really quickly and saw that Honor to Our Soldiers on that recording was arranged for a brass band by Paul Mayberry.
Oh, okay, yeah. He's kind of a big name in the arranging businesses.
Yeah, for sure.
There's a lot of stuff.
Definitely.
A lot of period music, very, very reputable
Gotcha.
and talented guy.
Do you recall if when you guys were recording this album, were you guys reading off of the original manuscript of the music, or were you reading new engraved parts? I know that was a while ago. But
I think it was a combination. I think we had access and maybe played off of some facsimiles of the original book, and some of them had been transcribed, and put in, whatever music notation stuff like we use now, those formats.
Right.
So it was more readable. But that book is probably the standard or most standard of any of the surviving Civil War music. You guys probably know that. I mean, there may be people that argue about it, but it's certainly one of them, if not the. And Mark, of course, knew that. So, and you guys know, there are a lot of opera overtures. We owe so much. Those band guys who were so talented because they were playing opera overtures on the same concert with these little silly marches. Where I always think about the tenor and the baritone players. The tenor would be like our French horn, or alto, excuse me, because most of it's button, 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 button. But especially those cornet parts, and there's no rest.
Right.
Yeah. So I know Mark Elrod is the one that helped obtain all that music for you. Was he also the one that kind of selected what was actually played, or was the quintet allowed to pick what was actually recorded? Well,
a little of both. No one, I don't recall if he ever told us, but he said, "Hey, you might want to play this." Was very popular during the Civil War era.
Gotcha.
Did you guys record anything that didn't make the final cut? Are there any?
No, we did that in 3 days. So we had to have it all picked out and pretty much rehearsed. So we had 56 minutes or whatever's on there. So we all had to take leave from the Army band while we did it. Because it was going to potentially be a paid engagement.
Right.
So we're all on leave. Which means that's time we can't have with our family. So that really focuses you on how you use your time.
Yeah.
Right.
But that's good though, because we knew exactly what we're doing. Well, I shouldn't go that far. Of course, oh my gosh, the instruments break down. Oh, right.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Speaking of those instruments, were those also supplied by Mark Elrod? He was really heavily involved.
Right, and he let us have the pick of the litter. He said, "Hey, this is the best tenor horn I got, best alto horn, blah blah blah."
Very cool. So, was it a deal where you guys went to his house and got to play a few horns first, or he just gave you those ones that he considered were the best?
He gave us several. Most of them were, he said, like especially maybe the tuba. He said, "This is by far maybe the best one I have in terms of playing ability. We don't care what it looked like, how shot up it was, or to us, it's really about performance. Like, are they in tune? Are they consistent? Do they slot well? Are they consistent octave to octave? You guys probably know about that.
Right.
Sometimes you have to play some pretty serious games when you go up or down an octave on those babies.
For sure.
Yeah.
What was the timeline like from when you guys first got your hand on those instruments and then actually recorded the album?
Not too long, really, only a couple of months. The funny part was, the first time I brought that up, the guys were rolling their eyes like, "Oh yeah, Yeah, we want to be known as Civil War guys, right? The Civil War stuff was just kind of coming back into vogue after the movie Gloria. You know what I mean? So the Glory, So it wasn't like real cool to be running around playing bop and bop and bop bop bop. So we got the horns, and they're still rolling their eyes like, we want our reputation to be going on these things, play so far out. And this will be cool. Yeah, really great idea, Denny. And we got settled in, and they picked up, and saw the movie and all that stuff, and all of a sudden it just kind of settled in. You know what? We can do this, and we can make them sound good. So we worked really hard on it. That was weird. You pick the horn up, you play it, and then you take it back after rehearsal's over. So it kind of doesn't belong with you. So you have to learn quickly. Unfortunately, the guys are so careful about intonation and stuff. That we worked it through. Yeah.
So you didn't get to hang on to the instruments between rehearsals?
Well, yes and no. It depends on the situation. Sometimes he needed them back because he had a job.
Oh, true.
Using one, and sometimes we were maybe able to keep them up for a month or so.
Gotcha.
In fact, we got several. There might even be a critique in the International Trumpet Guild. There were some people thought we were not using authentic instruments. They were using replicas.
Well, that's a nice compliment.
Well, it was, yeah. But now we did almost all use our current mouthpieces.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
And I know that's a big deal about Civil War aficionados. If you guys are putting your life on the lines every day playing Civil War mouthpieces, all I say is God bless it. But that's one compromise, if you want to call that a compromise, that we made, just to be fair to people. Yeah.
And then I also noticed that your recording doesn't utilize any percussion. It's pure 5 brass on the CD.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right.
Very cool. And then after the recording with classical brass for that album, did you guys return the instruments and never look at the stuff again, or did anything come from that?
Well, no, a couple of other things came along. Yeah, and I was thinking, do you guys know who, forgive my French, Saint-Gaudens? Saint-Gaudens, the sculpture, probably the most famous American. He's the one that sculpted the silver dollar and maybe even the $100 gold piece or something. Okay. Well, he did a whole bunch of Civil War. They call them reliefs, I think. They're sculptures on big plates. And his sculpture of the 54th Massachusetts Regiment, which was the story of the Glory, right? Mm-hmm. And Colonel Robert Gould Shaw.
Mm-hmm. Matthew Broderick.
What's that?
Matthew Broderick.
Yes, exactly. AKA, right. Yeah. The movie is, of course, he was killed and, unbelievable. Well, this relief was coming to town to be exhibited at the Smithsonian. Excuse me. Was it American History? I can't remember. Anyway, they brought it to town, big fanfare because the movie, it was the height of the Civil War, birthing mania, or whatever you call it, And so we played it in, I think it was on CBS Morning with maybe Charles Corral, I can't remember. So we played it in grand style, and some stuff like that came along.
Awesome. And do you still have that cornet?
Well, he's given it to me now. As a gift. Yeah.
Very cool.
He woke up, Mark was so sweet, so he called me one morning. He said, I just woke up to listen to your album, got some tears in my eyes, and said, would you like to have this horn? I said, well, yeah, Mark.
What is the horn?
It's an E-flat cornet, unnamed.
Unnamed, gotcha.
Right.
And that's bell front or over the shoulder? It is
bell front, yeah. Gotcha. Most likely, from what Mark's told me, because he's my authority on everything, Civil War, right? Probably if it was unnamed, it was probably made in Eastern Europe and probably brought into the country by another company or something.
Gotcha.
So kind of sort of under their name,
For sure.
Yeah,
that's really cool. I didn't know that there were other performances that you guys were able to do after the album, so that's awesome that...
I occasionally will get out and solo. I soloed with the Nova Band, I don't know, a year ago or so. I'll get out and play a solo occasionally with a group or something like that.
On that cornet?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
In uniform? Do you have a Civil War uniform?
I have a friend that loaned me one, and Mark's got some he's loaned me,
Gotcha.
Right.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that the other guys in the quintet were maybe a little apprehensive about the project at first, based on the music, because if you're not really in it and listening to a lot of the music, you might think it's just kind of like simple tunes and simple marches, but then you sit down to play a lot of it, and like you said, those cornet parts are not easy.
Oh my gosh,
at all.
Well, when you start getting into opera overtures and stuff, where everybody's going to end up with some melody, I think, well, they're not easy to play, especially on those instruments. So, Civil War stuff wasn't really cool then. either behind or ahead or something of the wave, the power wave, which is not unusual for us. So it took a little convincing to get the guys to do it. First of all, we had to play them well enough that they could say, yeah, okay, we can go to record doing this.
Right.
Because you don't want to, first of all, waste your time if it's a spec deal.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Right.
It's really cool saying that you were a part of the second wave, because we've, on this podcast, already discussed Frederick Fennell and his involvement with the Eastman Wind Ensemble's recording in 1960.
Right.
And how that music was kind of the first reawakening of this style of music for the centennial. Right, of the Civil War.
Right, it's real Americana stuff, but of course a lot of the stuff is not American music. They're opera overtures, but they were sort of Americanized by by the Great American Band movement.
Mm-hmm. And then I have a book that mentions how 1990, 1991 was the second revival, which is awesome to show that you're a part of that in terms of the second awakening and realization of this type of music. And in that book, he refers to it as the Ken Burns effect. So.
Yeah, no, absolutely, big time. But also, I really have to thank Mark, as I had before, and also Greg Squires, who had those contacts at American Heritage, which made the fact that he could maybe get us recorded, commercially or whatever, released commercially, made it a realistic, like I said, if I called them, they probably wouldn't have returned my call. So it's always a question of putting things together. Being always very professional and friends with people, and just being smart in the way we should be acting anyway.
Yeah, there you go.
So there's a little Sunday school lesson for you there, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's good. We'll charge people for access to that tidbit for the podcast. Yeah.
There you go. It's true though. It really is, and that's the only way this came around. Mark had full faith in my ability and trusting me with these horns, which are irreplaceable.
Oh yeah.
Some of them aren't horribly valuable, but I mean, they ain't making any more Civil War horns, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Built in 1860.
So we mentioned the kind of the second revival of this music, sometimes being referred to as the Ken Burns effect. And you were on screen in a movie, Steven Spielberg's Lincoln. So how did you get involved with that project?
That's a good question. Partly because of my contacts with Mark Elrod and stuff. The band leader that actually put the band together, more or less, was Don Johnson, and he ran a group, Civil War band in Kentucky. And long story short, the guy that does some of the music, what do you call it, production work, or he'll find music like for the John Adams series, right? Adams series, you guys remember that? Mm-hmm. He chose the music for that. So he's like a music consultant. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So if they're doing a period, they'll want to know, hey, what's most likely kind of music that people would be going on at a barn dance in 1860? Or what would you hear at a dinner party at John Quincy Adams' house? Stuff like that.
Yeah.
And he'll research it. And a lot of that stuff he already knows because he's a smart guy, just been around. Mm-hmm. So he got involved. And at that point, I called Mark and said, hey, they're going to be shooting this in Richmond. That's right down the road from me. And I'd love to be, blah, blah. Mark says, well, great. I'll call Don and we'll put you on the list or something. So I was like 8th on the list or something. Mm-hmm. And they're only going to use maybe two cornet players at that point. And then the filming got delay after delay after delay. There were rain delays. Right. And one by one, the guys on the band would say, well, I just can't do this. My daughter's getting married that weekend, or, we've got cruise tickets to go to blah, or whatever. So one by one, I hate to say they fell out, but, they just had to get off the job, and then he put the next guy in there, blah, blah, blah. And then finally I got a call, you know what? Why don't you send us a full length photo? Never any audition stuff. I guess the reputation of the album or something preceded, and, all done by reputation and, no audition at all. But they do need a full length photo of you. Oh, well, guess what that's about? You have to look like a Civil War.
Oh, yeah, true. Mm-hmm.
Right. So if you're overweight, Civil War guys are not overweight. They were lucky to get fed, sleeping on the ground every night. Yeah. They're not sitting around, eating chips all day long and, marching 20 miles a day, Right. Oh my gosh. A lot of those road marches were 20 miles a day after day after day,
mm-hmm. So it sounded like none of these people that were involved with playing in the band for this movie were as a group already associated with another band? It was purely just piecing together people from across the country?
Well, it started off as Don Johnson's band, or got members from his band. But one by one, some kind of surgery would come up. They couldn't guarantee they could be there, So one by one, I'd kind of move up the pecking order. And it wasn't necessarily about ability or anything. It's just, you want your friends working on the set with you, of course.
Right.
So I finally get this phone call, say, hey, will you submit a full-length photo? Well, I had one of Mark's uniforms that I maybe played. So I thought, well, let's go for it,
Yeah.
And once I got that call, I started letting my poor beard grow, which was really just incredibly ugly. I have to admit it. So I, got the horn. I had a horn, a civil horn. I had a hat. I go, well, we'll just go for it. Send some pictures in. They're checking, first of all, because if your name is Kim, you could be of Asian descent. Well,
yeah, true.
Or you could be female. Well, that's probably not going to work on a Civil War set, at least when there's soldiers involved, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Okay. So I fit that description.
So was that picture that you posed with the cornet, was that the classical brass cornet that you had?
Yeah. Well, that's Mark's cornet now. Remember. It ain't mine, at that point. So I sent that in, and they said, okay, well, about 2 weeks later, they run a police background investigation on you. They want to know your birth date and all that stuff, okay? Just like a White House clearance, it's essentially what it is. Because you're going to be standing next to Steven Spielberg at some points, standing next to some live gunpowder. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of chances that things could go wrong.
Yeah.
Right?
Sure. I think we should actually backtrack for a quick second. I think we didn't actually specify what your actual role was to be in this film. I know we say the band, but it's kind of an important band.
Yeah, right. Well, we call it the Lincoln Band, but yes, the movie has a scene, as you may recall, that's an inaugural scene, and they used the train station there in Petersburg because it was very similar to the railroad station, train station in Washington, D.C. In the 1860s. It's very, very similar. And it's still there, right, in Petersburg.
Yeah, so portraying an early Marine Band impression, right?
Correct. And I saw the artist renderings of the Marine Band uniforms in the 1860s. And what they came up with was stunning, right? To, what brass is. Hat brass, what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
The little badge on your hat that says unit or U.S. Army or U.S. Marine. Okay. And in the hat brass and the buttons on their uniforms, it was stunning how well they were made. And, because it had the insignia of Marine Band on the buttons. I mean, who's going to see that on
that's incredible.
On a movie? Well, you'd have to be pretty close to the band to see that.
It reminds me of my nerdiness with the Lord of the Rings. They talked about how they hand knitted chainmail for every single extra that was in that film, and it's like that's totally above and beyond what anybody's gonna see through the film. So that's cool that they stamped Marine Band on stuff.
Oh, it's unbelievable! Just anyway, so they wanted real authentic horns, not reproductions. Well, we fit that category, okay. Mm-hmm. So we get in. We're starting to shoot the first time, and they're talking to guys. The PA, the production assistant comes, and she says, "Sorry, guys, you're gonna have to take your glasses off." Okay, no problem. These obviously are not 1860s glasses. Well, several guys had frames that were made in the 1860s. They bought at antique stores, okay, antique shops and stuff. They find them on vacation. Oh, stop, And so she said, "I'm sorry." A couple of these guys, man, they are really passionate about this stuff. They know exactly when the glass frames were. Oh my gosh, it goes on and on. So she said, "I'm sorry, sir. I know those were made in the Civil War, but you don't understand." What they were worried about, I thought they were going to get into a fist fight because these guys are passionate about this stuff. They want to tell you all about it. Yeah. But what it turns out, it was modern glass, of course. They were afraid it would reflect light in a way that was not typical. I mean, that's how careful they are about stuff like it. Was stunning.
Yeah, well, yeah. Was there somebody assigned to historical accuracy for the band in particular, or
not anybody on set that I knew of? I think they just trusted, well, yes and no. They trusted my friend who was the consultant who was on the job just playing bass drum. He was actually a violinist, but he got on the scene, he's kind of the consultant, so he gets to be on it if he can, so he's just playing bass drum. And then Mark, of course, was there, so honestly, they had the best consultants in the business, really.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
They weren't brought in specifically, as production people, but
was the horn that you were playing for that the Mark Elrod's bell front that you used for the classical brass album?
No, I used a. Oh yeah, no. The one in the movie is over the shoulder.
Gotcha. Was that one of Mark's also, or is that?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Correct.
How many days were you guys there for shooting?
We did it all in one day, but for actual shooting. But you have to know you're there a full day ahead. You meet with hair and makeup people. You know, they took one look at my scraggly beard and they're kind of rolling their eyes. Oh yeah, this guy's going to be fun. So they get you in there, and then they take. She had an iPad, and she took pictures of me with all kinds of angles, and all kinds of graphics. She would put, you know, like sideburn would go down to here or whatever. Mm-hmm. And she sends it to a consultant in New York City. Then the word comes back. Well, try it's like an M61 or something sideburns, and the M63 goatee. So she goes over. She got a whole stack of drawers. Right now, this is outside under a tent, so this stuff's all totally portable. Mm-hmm. So she can go. She matches the color that matches my hair, and I was just stunned.
Yeah, well,
right. So they shave all my stuff off. Of course, it looks so bad with the loss, right? And that's where that came from. Yeah. Now the problem is when you start playing, you know, you're moving your embouchure around.
Oh, true.
It gets, you know, between every cut, some hair and makeup person redoes your stash. So you know. Yeah. You don't have to deal with that with rifle carrying guys too often, right?
Right. Yeah, no, that's for sure.
Right.
In preparation for the for this interview, I went back and actually rewatched Lincoln. Like I needed an excuse. It's a great film and should be watching it anyway. But I noticed that for your guys' scene, you guys are playing the tune "We're Coming, Father Abraham," 300,000 more.
Correct.
Was that tune you guys playing on set, or was that not even you guys playing, or how did that?
Live. That's us playing live.
Okay, cool. So there was no studio session to get that music.
Correct. I think rehearsed just kind of casually on our own because we wanted to sound good, you know. Right. Just a matter of our own pride, but there was no rehearsal time because they have to pay you for that. See, now the next issue is you may notice the crowd is singing along.
Yeah.
Okay. If they have a rehearsal, they have to be paid as talent instead of extras. I mean, it's just great how it goes. And you're paid at the LA rate, even though it's shot in Petersburg, Virginia.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Because that's where the studio was headquartered.
Yeah, lots of hoops to jump through, I guess, when you're bringing that many people into work.
It's really, of course, the union's involved, and that, you know, some of that's good. It's, you know, but you have people on stage, and they're paid at, I don't know, a dozen different rates depending on what they're doing, you know. So, in other words, if you're just a crowd, hi, President Lincoln, you know, whatever. You're paid at one rate. If you're actually singing, that's okay. But if there's a rehearsal, then now you're deemed a musician instead of crowd noise, essentially, right?
Interesting. Yeah,
I'm glad to hear that you guys were playing live and that's what they used, because that just kind of that to me really fits with what you were describing as, you know, their attention to detail on the costume and the makeup and all that stuff.
It was unbelievable. You know, I really. It's really fun to see what they do, just creativity and dedication and artistry.
Yeah.
A nice checkbook to back it up. Right?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, oh my gosh, yeah. Well, you know, Steven Spielberg puts his name on something, the money's going to come, you know. He's going to do it the way he wants to do it. So
right. And that film, or that scene, rather, where you guys are playing, that is a large scene. There's a lot of people involved, and, of course, Daniel Day-Lewis is there, you know, playing Lincoln.
Right.
Was there any editing tricks where you guys actually weren't with Daniel Day-Lewis, or were you near him, or how did that
we weren't that close to him, but you know, he's not a real tall guy, okay? And Lincoln, of course, was, I don't know, 6'2", you guys.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
I mean, he was really tall. Yep. So they had to find, you know, they had an armed escort with him, soldiers. So they had to find soldiers that were shorter to make, so he didn't look, you know. But my gosh, what a talent. Unbelievable talent. You know.
Did you get to meet him?
Not personally. I met pretty much everybody else. He keeps to himself. You know, he kind of wraps him, or at least my experience around him. And if you hear him interviewed, you'll kind of see that too. He kind of seems to himself and really absorbs, you know.
Seems like a real methodical actor.
Oh, he's incredible.
Yeah, I think he's into the whole method acting thing, where if he's taking on a character, he tries to, you know, live like that character. Right. In preparation for the project.
He does a really thorough. You know, what he does with voices and stuff is really pretty.
Yeah. I was rewatching, as I just said, Lincoln in preparation for this, but then I had also watched, just for fun, rewatched Gangs of New York about a week ago. And of course, Daniel Day-Lewis is Bill the Butcher in that movie too. So going back and forth between Daniel Day-Lewis and those two films, both set, in the same year, essentially, right? They're both in 1864-ish, around there.
Look at the difference in the accents he had to assume.
Yeah, it's incredible.
I know. Yeah, he's really gifted. There's no question about that.
In terms of who was who with the band, was there anybody on set that was designated as the band leader?
Well, that would
were you guys all just? Sorry. Yeah.
We had it. Well, yeah. I was just there was a drum major there, but he it was really just kind of for show. Now he was a high school band director, so he knows what he knows what he's doing. Mm-hmm. But the person that was making the calls really was Don Johnson.
Gotcha. So then I guess that person that was acting as drum major though of the band would have been Francis Scala, maybe then, who was.
Well, that's right.
Yeah, interesting. That's not a terrible gig to have, playing Francis Scala in a Steven Spielberg movie.
It could be worse now, right?
Yeah.
It could be worse, right? Hey, let me go back, if you don't mind.
Yeah, definitely.
Qualifications to get on the band. I told you, first of all, the full-length photograph. You have to look the part, or at least anything they can doctor up with hair and makeup is cool. But they can't take 50 pounds off of you or whatever.
Yeah.
All right. Then we go through the police background investigation. Okay, mm-hmm. And this is something people ought to hear. There were a couple more steps. Then you fill out a form and say, I will not ever have my cell phone on the set. They don't want any pictures taken of Daniel Day-Lewis sitting around with his collar open. Yeah. Before the film. So big deal. You sign your life away, which is cool. We all get that. Yeah. The last thing you do, what would you think? What would you guess, guys?
Probably a non-disclosure agreement. You can't talk about it until the film.
No, that's part of the deal with the cell phone.
Right? Oh, gotcha.
Right. Yeah, you do not discuss any of that stuff, right?
Yeah.
The sexual harassment thing? I don't know.
Well, that's all part of behavior and how you act on the set.
Yeah,
right?
I have no idea.
They check your Facebook page.
Oh, really?
Huh.
So some of our younger listeners might want to know that, might want to be aware of that.
So,
they're finding somebody that says, if somebody ever does that to me again, I don't think you want this guy standing next to Daniel Day-Lewis or Steven.
Yeah.
Wow.
Just something to keep in mind.
Did they request permission to see it if yours was set to private, or did they just see what was available?
I don't remember them requesting that. Back in those days, I think you could probably get away with that. I'm not sure what the deal is now. There's some school systems that are starting to do that, and there's, the technology questions are way ahead of the law, as you probably know.
Right. It's incredible that there was so much background and due diligence done for members of the band that were in the film for about 2 minutes, right? So now you see why.
Wait a minute. That was originally 8 minutes. You're taking 6 minutes of my fable. Because the film was, I don't know, like 4 hours at one point. And of course, that's not going to work in the theater.
So of course they cut the band, right?
Well,
Maybe
we sounded fabulous. Let's face it, we sounded fabulous. But the story survives without all of that, right?
That's true.
Maybe there's some director's cut somewhere where that scene is longer.
There you go.
Yeah.
So did you guys have other tunes that you were performing besides Father Abraham, or
that was it? Yeah.
Awesome. You were mentioning obviously all the people involved in the band world that were helping you out. Do you recall if Paul Mayberry was involved in this project as well?
That name came up. I don't know if he was in on the first level and maybe had to bow out because of the scene filming got moved back farther and farther and farther, because of rain delays. And it was in Richmond, which is a big city. It's not New York City, but, there were certain days they couldn't film because of stuff going on in the city, and it got pushed back. And then finally, I think it got moved to Petersburg. I'm not sure they were intending to film there originally. Right, which meant more delays. All the equipment has to be moved down there,
Mm-hmm.
And so people were redoing their life month after month to stay on this film,
Yeah.
And I fortunately had the flexibility, to just go do it,
Yeah. During this time, were you still with the Army band when this film was going?
No, I'd been out of the band about 2 years, Chris.
Gotcha. Very cool.
So I really could do it kind of on a minute's notice. And I told them that, hey, if something comes up, call me. I'm there in 90 minutes, guys.
Yeah, for sure.
I told you guys how I got on the film. They'd never asked me to come and audition and play a part. It was all done by reputation, people I knew. There again, like we were talking about before, how that album came about. You'd be amazed at the opportunities people turn away by acting mean or doing something that's maybe dishonest, or so again, a free Sunday school lesson, but that's how it happened. I never played a note in any kind of audition. We all get cranked up playing excerpts, and that's cool in certain environments, but some things aren't done that way. They're done by reputation and background, and people that worked with you for 10 years or 20 years. They know you'll be on time. They know you can handle pressure. They know you'll be there at 4 a.m. Mm-hmm. You won't be whining about it. Get your hair on.
Yeah. Was that your call time for the film? Was 4?
Yeah. We had to be there. I mean, you go through hours of makeup and all that stuff by the time you get everybody in there. So even if you go at 4 o'clock, it takes them till 6 to get everybody done. You just sit around and enjoy your makeup.
Yeah.
Hold up your new hairpiece, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's super important that, a lot of this stuff is more than, what you can do on the horn. You have to have a good attitude behind it and all that stuff. That's a super important message.
Well, it was really cold that morning. It was like upper 30s, as I recall, when we started filming at 7, and so, I mean, there's intonation problems. You guys know all this stuff, but there's also, in some jobs, there'd be people complaining, why do we, well, that's it. That's how it works.
Yeah.
You say yes or no. You can, smile or grumble, whatever you want to do. But if you're grumbling, there may be some people that just aren't real happy being around you.
Yeah, for sure.
It's a high pressure in some ways. The music is, real simple, but it's not about that. It's about just being professional, being on time, and cheering people on. If they ask you to play second part instead of first part or whatever, you say, you bet. Mm-hmm. And you say, I'm going to make it sound like $1 million too.
Yeah, there you go. Attitude, for sure.
Right. Absolutely.
How was the food on set?
Oh my gosh, it was fabulous. Oh my gosh. And I didn't know her at the time. I have a friend in the Los Angeles area who does nothing but catering for movie sets. Mm-hmm. And just talking to her, it's fantastic.
Yeah, that's awesome. Was it all Civil War hardtack and coffee, or
No. It was great. A lot of vegetarian stuff,
There you go.
Right. Yep. Fantastic.
That's awesome.
Yeah, they don't mess around. At least not with Steven Spielberg.
Yeah. I guess he can get whatever he wants on that table.
Well, by the time he's after several of the movies, it's just the budget for something like that's huge, guys. It's just unbelievable, all the stuff. Yeah. They bring in. They had horses there, so now they have to have horse trainers. They have to have people from PETA watching them, make sure they're not ill-treated, and and they might as well be union horses the way they're treated. They've got pretty much as much rights as you do, on this set.
Wow. Did you get a chance to meet Spielberg while you were filming?
Not then. I met him. Believe it or not, I met him at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldiers. I like to say I played taps for him. He was there. It might have been like on the Army birthday or something, because Private Ryan had just come out.
Okay.
Gotcha. So this was before you were associated with the Lincoln film, then?
Yes, correct.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
Very cool. And then,
so he would, is an honor accorded to somebody who's really been a friend to the Army.
Yeah.
That did really great public relations work for the Army, and just stuff those people go through.
Yeah, definitely. Even
though it's World War II, makes us think about how we should honor our military.
Mm-hmm.
So they accorded him that honor. So I got to talk with him a little bit. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. And then I know you have a picture in your office at George Mason of you standing with the band next to Spielberg as well. Was that taken the day of filming for the movie?
What you probably saw in my office was one we did at Gettysburg with Steven Spielberg. We went up there for the dedication of what's the book by the female author about Lincoln and
Team of Rivals.
Team
of Rivals, yeah.
We're honoring her and him just for what they'd done for Civil War historians and how much they'd helped bring the Civil War back to life.
So are those the same people that were involved in Lincoln's band for the Lincoln movie that were asked to be involved with Gettysburg?
I think we had at least one guy I know was different, but it was basically the same people. Again, you get people that have, just job requirements they can't get out of, or family commitments,
Mm-hmm. Was that the only other time that band was back together after filming?
No, we were together a couple of other times. We played something in Richmond. I can't remember what it was. Some kind of celebration down there for the governor or something. We played at International Trumpet Guild once, So we got together. Now, they did a lot of stuff without me. As it turns out, Don bought the uniforms from the movie company.
Oh, wow.
After the movie shooting. They have to wait, 6 months or a year or something. They don't want those things just showing up, in
Yeah,
pawn
yeah.
shops, and stuff
Yeah,
like
of
that.
course.
So he was able to work some kind of deal to buy all of them. So he actually had owned them. Yeah. So
Well,
we
that's
could.
awesome that he's able to get those. I would assume that after a film like that, it would probably be more common practice to just throw the stuff out. So it's good that it's with somebody that appreciates it and is able to use it, going
Right.
forward.
Right.
And then
They had to wait a year or something. I can't remember. There was some kind of stipulation.
yeah, it
They
makes
wanted
sense.
the gloss of the movie production and also all the Grammys and all that stuff. I mean, all the awards to be over with before
Yeah,
those started to appear somewhere.
definitely that makes
Right.
sense. And then it might have been before the microphone was on, before we actually started the interview. But then you're also talking about how, in addition to the Lincoln film and the performances associated with that after the fact, you've also performed on your period cornet and done some other Civil War band work also,
Uh-huh.
right? Were there other bands or other performances that you were involved with that weren't that Lincoln's Own band after the film?
Um, I did a couple other things with the Lincoln Band. Like I think we did play an Obama, some kind of inaugural gala. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I had a little bit of Civil War with the Columbia Concert Band with Vince DiMartino. You guys know who that name?
I know him as a composer, I think. Oh no, that's Anthony. No, never mind.
Yeah, no, he's
Totally different person.
he's a trumpet player, quite a jazz player, very, very versatile player. So I did a couple of things with them, recording with them. That's about it, I guess, over the years.
Awesome. And all this is kind of sound like it was more just coincidental opportunities in terms of Classical Brass's album and the Lincoln film, right?
Right, right.
Yeah,
And
very
again,
cool.
it's people that like to work with you. So if
Yeah.
they bring something to DC, they can't bring all their players up from Kentucky. Maybe they can't afford to, or so they hire local guys they know.
Right.
What would you say your relationship is now with Civil War brass music and that time period?
I'd like to be doing more with it, to tell you the truth. Yeah. I've just been torn. I run the National Trumpet Competition. Spend so much time raising money. I don't have a lot of time to go out and promote Civil War stuff or get on the phone and call people. But usually when I'm asked if I can work it out, I do it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Edelbrock, for coming on to the podcast with us this afternoon to talk. It was awesome hearing your insight into the recording project for classical brass, but then also your experience with the Lincoln film. So thank you so much for talking with us.
My pleasure. It's been fun, and as we go through this COVID, all the stuff that has to be done remotely, as you guys know, that's one of the things I really love about my studio at George Mason University. We're doing a couple projects virtually, and we forget how much we enjoy being together in ensembles.
Yeah,
Right.
definitely. Yeah,
Yeah.
it means a lot, and you don't realize what you have until it's gone.
Well, my guys realize it, and I think that's why they're so willing and interested in doing this. And how many times have I gone by the studio where the Civil War band, the Civil War quintet's working right outside my studio?
Yeah, definitely.
So I know you guys know this, but George Mason University is really sort of a wonderful universal hub for all kinds of players. I mean, no matter how interested you are in jazz, if you really want to go for like a competition level solo player, which maybe hopefully will lead to an orchestra job or service band job, or now Civil War. And I've talked with Dr. Mike Nickens, as I know you guys know him, but he's really, really interested in Civil War stuff. But, that's great. So extra special thanks to Dr. Mike Nickens, a faculty colleague with me at the George Mason University here in suburban Washington, D.C. in Fairfax County. We have, oh my gosh, well, of course, we're right there next to the Smithsonian. There's so much history that's involved for anybody who's interested in historical instruments as well. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, so that's great. Working with all the trumpet guys at Mason has been a real treat. What else do you have going on? What else are you involved with in the trumpet world, where people can find you?
Yeah, well, thanks for asking, Steve. My biggest passion is actually having created the National Trumpet Competition. And when we first created it at George Mason, we had maybe 40 people that showed up the first year.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought, we're going to call this national and see what happens. And gosh darn it, we had almost 800 people. Well, it would have come had we not crashed because of COVID, right?
Right.
And it's done more for just the process of putting a recording together. It's done more for studios around the country than I would have ever imagined. plus the level of playing and the number of works that are being now commissioned to be performed and premiered at the National Trumpet Competition is off the charts. So we have a website, if you want to look at it, nationaltrumpetcomp.org, that has literally hundreds of master classes by all kinds of performers we've had there live, like Doc Severinsen and Maynard Ferguson and Phil Smith and Canadian Brass and Minoso Brass, and it goes on and on. Mm-hmm. And a lot of them have donated their time and done master classes, which you can download for free. We're like an online university. So we're be helping other generations. And we've had people, I've got questions from students in Turkey, wondering about stuff from the trumpet competition. So it's really a universal language and it's a universal training ground for players. So
neat. And we'll definitely have links to all of this stuff, everything we've mentioned in the episode. We'll have it up on our website. So if you missed it during the episode, you can find it there.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Edelbrock. Stay healthy, stay safe, and thank you again.
You guys, and stay musical and stay professional. You guys are wonderful to work with.
Great. Well, that was a fantastic conversation. Thanks so much to Dr. Edelbrock for turning on the computer and talking to us today. We know he was with his family, so we really appreciate him taking the time to talk about his experiences with us. If you like what you heard and like what you've heard in the past from us, it would really help if you subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Most people, it seems like, are listening on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. You can find us there or any other of the podcast streaming apps. We're also on YouTube. We upload these episodes there, and we know a lot of you are finding us there. If you have questions about anything you heard in the episode, you can email us at eabb.podcast@gmail.com. And as always, we'll have a show notes page on our website. That's eabbpodcast.com. You can find the show notes pages there, and they'll have more information and more links to things we mentioned in the episode.
Be sure to check out our friends Addressing Gettysburg podcast and History Tunes. Those projects will be listed in our show notes page as well. This episode's featured album is Honor to Our Soldiers by Classical Brass. That is the album that was mentioned during the interview towards the beginning with Dr. Dennis Edelbrock as one of the cornetists in that project. So be sure to check our show notes page where we break down and give you some additional information about that album. Again, that is Honor to Our Soldiers by Classical Brass. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next week.